Welcome back, everyone. Doing something a little different today. So, if you saw my community post about a week or so ago, I posted a link to something I discovered in the process of looking through records in my own personal research. And I came upon the scrapbook for the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment. And this one was actually, it appears to have been in the Bangor Public Library in Bangor, Maine. And somebody scanned it and uploaded it to the internet in PDF form. And I'll put the link in the description if you want to look through it yourself. But I thought it might just be fun to kind of look through it, talk a little bit about what we're seeing. If you're familiar with Band of Brothers, this is the regiment that Easy Company was a part of. But this is a scrapbook for the entire regiment, and it shows a lot of photos I've never seen before. And I've looked for a lot of these photos over time. So we're going to see some familiar faces, people that we've experienced through Band of Brothers and things like that. Interesting that it's made in Germany. So I thought that was kind of cool. And I'll just invite you, if there's anything I don't observe or comment on that you found interesting that I don't highlight in this video, let me know in the comment section below. There are a lot of these available, and we have the one from my wife's grandfather's unit, the 379th Bomb Group. And most units, especially units that saw combat, have books like this, which are really, really cool. And it starts with a note written to the men of the regiment by Colonel Sink, who commanded the regiment pretty much through the entire war. Right at the very end, after victory in Europe, he was promoted to, I think, assistant division commander in the 101st Airborne. But by then, their combat was over. So here we have Major General W.C. Lee, who I believe was the original commander of the 101st Airborne when they were training before General Taylor took over. So here was the original assistant division commander, Brigadier General Don Pratt, who was killed in a glider crash in Normandy on D-Day. And that's something you don't hear about, is that their assistant division commander was killed. I want to say he was killed when the glider came in on a hard landing, and there was a Jeep in the glider and it crushed him or something like that. I think I remember that being what happened. But now here you have General Maxwell Taylor, who commanded them through most of their combat operations. Of course, General McAuliffe, who you see here, was the artillery commander and was in temporary command of the division when they went into Bastogne, because General Taylor was back in the States at the time. And he's the one, General McAuliffe, who uttered that famous response to the surrender demand when he said, "Nuts." And it says here, General McAuliffe now leads the 103rd Division. How magnificently he carried the flame, and at the crucial moment, with understandable logic, he could fan it with a single word and crisp the enemy. I love that. That is fantastic. General Higgins was one of the youngest brigadier generals in the Army. So that's very cool. And here's a picture there showing them. I would guess that maybe is on a training jump, or that could be in Holland when they dropped in. Colonel Bob. There's Colonel Sink, a drawing of him. Colonel R.F. Sink graduated from the United States Military Academy and commissioned a second lieutenant June 12th, 1927. Since that time, he served in Porto, P-O-R-T-O, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines, and in several stations in the U.S. as an infantryman. So you got another picture of him there. Boy, this guy looks a lot like Donnie Wahlberg, doesn't he? That's Lieutenant Colonel Charles Chase. And we don't hear a lot about the other officers, field grade officers in the regiment, but a number of them were actually killed during the course of the war. So Colonel Chase right there, Regimental XO, New Englander, State of Maine. With us since it began, Major Lewis R. Kent. Here's Colonel Strayer, who we do see a lot in Band of Brothers. And Colonel Strayer actually was one of the last surviving officers of the 506th. Lived a long time. I got to visit his grave in Arlington National Cemetery when I was there. So here we have Lieutenant Colonel Lloyd Patch. So let's see. Major Horton. So you hear Major Horton referred to. He was killed in the Netherlands. You remember when Dick Winters gets promoted famously to XO of 2nd Battalion. Now, the way you see that portrayed in Band of Brothers is that right after the fight at the crossroads, Colonel Sink is there talking to Captain Nixon and Captain Winters, and he talks about the attack, and he says Ollie Horton was killed, and Nixon says Major Horton's dead, and then right after that, Sink says, Captain Nixon, excuse us, and he pulls Winters aside. But in actuality, it was several days later before that promotion happened. Colonel Hester, who originally was a part of Easy Company, we see him here. I want to say Colonel Hester ended up commanding the 101st Airborne later in his career. So you see him there. And here's a really cool picture because you see right there on the left, none other than Captain Sobel. And that's not a picture of Captain Sobel. I've seen pictures of Captain Sobel, a few, but I'd never seen this picture of all the staff. Who you don't see in this picture and who's on the side there is Major Richard Winters. And it shows him there on the right. And that's also not a picture I had previously seen of Winters. So that's pretty cool. So you got Winters there. This is that's Strayer right there. And it says here, Lieutenant Colonel Strayer, acting regimental exec. And that was why in Bastogne, like in the attack on Foy, you see Captain Winters in command of the battalion. He actually was the battalion XO, but because Colonel Strayer was the acting regimental XO, and actually I think at the time he might have been serving on the staff in a different capacity, like serving as like intelligence officer or something for the regiment. Winters was acting battalion commander. So you see here Major Grant, S4, and Battalion X, Arkansas, good poker player, killed on D-Day. Major Leach. It talks about these different guys and kind of describes what they did. Here are some more down here. Major Franklin Foster, Major George Grant, Major William Leach, Major Robert Harwick, Lieutenant Colonel Carl Buchner, and Lieutenant Colonel Harold Hanna. People you don't hear anything about in the course of all of this. Now here's the company commanders, at least the ones at the end of the war. You have Easy Company, Captain Ron Spears. I love the fact that all of these other guys are in their dress uniforms, and then Spears is in a picture with a Tommy gun in his hand with binoculars around him. It really just kind of fits that persona really, really well. And now you have a complete list of the men killed in action from the entire regiment. And, of course, a lot of these guys are from Easy Company, but most of them are not. Robert Matthews, I think, was Easy Company. There's Thomas Meehan. And, of course, you see over here Terrence Harris. If you remember the scene when the NCOs mutiny, which results in Captain Sobel being reassigned and Lieutenant Meehan given command of the regiment, Harris is the guy who gets transferred out of the regiment. He says, Sergeant Harris, you are hereby out of my regiment. Well, he did get busted to private, and he did get transferred, but he eventually ended up back in the 506th, and he was killed in Normandy. And you can see all of the men from the regiment who were killed in Normandy, quite a few of them. And, of course, like a good chunk of the men of Easy Company who were killed in action during the entire war were the ones who were killed on D-Day, either in the crash of Company HQ or in other action. And you see other men here. Here's the ones killed in Holland, Major Horton. There was a Captain John Kiley. Second Lieutenant James Deal was, had been the company first sergeant for Easy Company after Sergeant Evans was killed in the company HQ plane on D-Day. James Deal was the first sergeant after that, so he was Winters' first sergeant. And Deal was recommended by Winters for a battlefield commission. He was given that commission as second lieutenant, reassigned to another company in the regiment, and then killed in Holland. Some of the other guys from Easy Company who are killed in Holland, of course, we have men like Miller, James Miller, who was a replacement played by James McAvoy in Band of Brothers. There's Corporal William Dukeman, who we know was killed with Easy Company at the Crossroads, the only man killed in the Crossroads. I think Van Klinken is another one who was a member of Easy Company there, who actually spoke Dutch, and his family was from the Netherlands. So he was kind of back in his home area. And then there's Belgium. We've got Lieutenant Colonel James Leprade, who was killed. A number of officers killed in Belgium. A lot of these, of course, are going to be at Bastogne. There's Skip Muck right there. Patrick Neal's another guy from Easy Company. Just kind of looking at Alex Pancala right there. These are all Easy Company guys. There were two guys named Webb, Harold and Ken Webb, who were both from Easy Company. And then men who die in Germany. Major William Leach. I don't know if he was the one. I know there was an officer that is talked about in Band of Brothers who was an officer, a high-ranking officer in the 506 who had no combat experience, and so he decided to take a patrol out, but they didn't tell anybody that they were taking the patrol out, and so men of Easy Company fired on these men on boats in the middle of the river because they thought they were enemy, because they hadn't been given any notification there was going to be a friendly patrol. And so they opened fire and killed this officer along with a number of men. And it was the officer's fault for having not informed them that the patrol was happening. All the missing in action that you have listed here. And you can see return to military control, missing in action, killed in action, return to duty. Things like that. Of course, non-battle casualties, and that's where you're going to have people like John Janovec, who was killed in that accident as a member of Easy Company. So here we have some more. These are some NCOs here, and let's see if there's anybody we recognize. I don't see anybody. Sergeant Rogers, I think he's an Easy Company guy. Well, maybe not. It shows here as HQ. Sergeant Lynch here, he's Easy Company. He might be the guy who replaced Talbert when Talbert decided to get himself demoted and go back down to be among the men instead of being first sergeant. I think Lynch might be the guy who replaced him. So really cool pictures here. And then, so then you get these write-ups. This is basically their yearbook from the war. So it's really cool stuff that we're looking at. Why is the trooper forever boasting of his physical ability to endure long marches and strenuous calisthenics? He boasts of his past accomplishments, of what he will someday do. Why the self-assured cocky air so plainly accentuated by his mirror-polished boots, tilted cap, bloused trousers, and bounce? Why is he paid more than the other soldiers in combat? Will he prove his right to boastfulness and extra pay? Will the paratrooper carry on the traditions of the American Army, or is he merely an over-publicized glamour boy? They kept asking. And I think the answer, of course, to this is, yeah, we deserved all of that. We earned it. Absolutely. So here you have a presidential unit citation with the oak leaf cluster, which means they were awarded that twice. When you were awarded the same citation or the same medal more than once, you got that little indication on there to show that rather than showing separate medals. So now, I mean, we've got some images here, and none can deny he established the right with a vengeance to all he had done and said and more. The world paid homage to his deeds and heroism. Not all the enemy's fire and fury could stop his sure advance. Such as he did not die quietly, but savagely among the hedgerows, canals, and snowdrifts. So we're talking about Normandy, the Netherlands, and Bastogne with those references. He fought and died, and he won the respect of all nations. From Normandy to Bastogne, the Nazi was filled with fear when he faced the Amerikaner Fallschirmjäger. Fallschirmjäger is the German word for paratrooper. I think it literally means parachute hunter. The American paratrooper won himself and his comrades a shining place among the great military forces of freedom. Overpaid killer. Interesting. Activated July 20th, 1942. Prior to this date, a small cadre of officers and non-commissioned officers were quartered in a wall tent area, which had been euphoniously named Camp Toombs. So, yeah, it's interesting. It was called Camp Toombs, named after General Toombs, I think it was, who was I want to say, a Confederate officer during the Civil War. And then there was something where when they would get dropped off at the rail station in Toccoa, they walked past like a funeral, like a place where they made tombstones or a cemetery or something. And so they felt it was just all a little too morbid to walk past that symbol of death to a place called Camp Tombs. And so they changed it. They were telling us about that when I was at Toccoa. And then we were walking through the museum there, which I was there a year ago at this time, which is really kind of cool. The 506 was one of the first units to train together from basic all the way through as a unit. Most units, you went to basic and then you got assigned to your permanent unit. These guys trained from day one with the guys they would go into combat with, at least the original Toccoa men, as they were known, who always have remained closer than the replacements that came later. Now, there are exceptions to that. A guy like Babe Heffron, who was a replacement. But most people think of him as being one of the original guys, but he wasn't. So there's Currahee, and showing some of the training. Really, really cool to see these pictures and to see what these guys were doing from the very beginning and how in good shape they were. In the book Band of Brothers, it talks about how when they were done with their basic training at Toccoa and they went for their jump school, originally, they were supposed to be like a first part of jump school where they did further physical training. But what happened was the first guys that showed up to jump school were in far better shape than the men doing the training for leading them in training. Like they'd start running, the 506 guys would start running backwards and like taunting the men who were leading them in the training. And they finally went to the commanders and said, listen, the guys we're supposed to be training are in better shape than we are. And so then the rest of the guys in the 506 actually got to skip that first part of training and go right to phase 2 of the training. Oh, it was A stage, I think is what it was called, that first part of the training. So then they got to move right to B stage. So then, this is interesting. Guys jumping over walls with machetes in their hand. Here they are with bayonet training. There's the athletic field. This is really cool, kind of seeing from the very beginning with the training. So there was this thing that happened where I guess Colonel Sink, and they don't show any of this in Band of Brothers. Colonel Sink, I guess, read in Life magazine or something that a battalion of Japanese troops had marched like 100 miles in 3 days. And Sink decided, well, our guys can beat that. And so he picked the 2nd Battalion because he felt they were the best trained. To do this march to Atlanta. And they did like 120 or 130 miles in 3 days. And the weather was absolutely miserable while they did it. And like they would wake up in the morning and everything would be frozen to the ground. And you can imagine it wasn't just a matter of marching, but you had to carry your full equipment. And so guys that were the mortar men had to carry their base plate and their mortar. The machine gunners had to carry their machine guns. Heavy, heavy stuff. And they did it and did it well. So here's Dog Company marching, Colonel Strayer and staff. So Armistice Day, November 11th. So here's the 2nd Battalion march to Atlanta. The other 2 battalions got to take trains to their next stage. So 600 singing paratroopers do a 115-mile march in 3 days. So they set world record in forced march. This one says 125 or 120 miles. So that shows them doing the march, and it was just brutal. It looks better than it really was from how things were described. So then B, C, and D stage, showing a little bit more of what they were up to. So you keep seeing references to red, white, and blue. So if you ever noticed in Band of Brothers, you'll see that they have the spade on their helmets that's white. And that was actually, those were symbols, and the white indicated that they were the 2nd Battalion. Each battalion had its own color. So 1st Battalion was red, and I guess 3rd Battalion must have been blue. So here's guys from Abel, Baker, and Charlie companies. And here's the letter that they get on December 18th, 1942. Memorandum to the soldiers of the 506 Parachute Infantry. You have now become qualified parachutists and wear the wings of the parachute soldier. This is when they made their 5 qualifying jumps. You are a member of one of the finest regiments in the United States Army. I can't help but kind of read this in Colonel Sinks. You are a member, like Luz kind of imitating him. Soldiers of the regiment. And I can't do it. I'm terrible. I can understand accents and usually pick out where they're from, but I can't imitate them. You're about to go on furlough into the homes of relatives or friends, and then he reminds them how to carry themselves. And one of the things you don't see in Band of Brothers was that they had this 10-day furlough. And then they were told to be back on time or else there would be consequences. And it really sat badly with the men, because what happened was a lot of guys, they tried to get back on time, but trains were late, transportation didn't arrive. And a lot of guys ended up late getting back from their furlough. And they actually chose, I think, one guy from each company to be drummed out of the regiment. And sent to a regular infantry regiment. And they did this whole ceremony. So they would basically draw a name of all the guys who were late. And one of them would be made an example. And they ripped they ripped their jump wings off of them. They pulled their trousers out so they weren't bloused. They ripped the 506 insignia off of them. And they were drummed out of the regiment. And the guys that were interviewed for the book said it just disgusted them, because here was a guy who had worked his tail off. Because remember, 1 in 3 officers and men who began the training actually made it to the end of the training. 2/3 of the guys who signed up for the airborne did not qualify because they couldn't take the training. And so these were men who had made it through, only maybe because of something that was out of their control, to be humiliated in front of everybody and sent to be a regular infantry guy and not get to serve with the airborne. It just must have been just awful for them. So here's a bunch more pictures just showing kind of what came next. Beer Hounds Atlas of the South, and it shows kind of all the places that they explored and everything. So Camp Shanks then. Camp Shanks is where they go to. I think it's up the Hudson River north of New York. And this is where they take the trains, and you have that scene where they're on their way, and Nixon comes in and tells Winters, well, as the intelligence officer, I know where we're going, but if I told you, I'd have to kill you. And Winters says, so don't tell me. And then he says, troop ship in New York, we're invading Europe, and England. And so Camp Shanks was the place they went. The SS Samaria was the ship that they took to get over there. And then, of course, now they do further training in England. There's a picture of King George VI. And Winter stayed with his family, who he became lifelong friends with, who he was quartered with. And they did further jumps there. And one of the things you don't see, if you remember a scene during the training at Camp Toccoa, there's a soldier who, when they're eating spaghetti, says, this is orange. Spaghetti's not supposed to be orange. And it has his name on his shirt there. Well, that guy was actually killed in a training jump in England before they jumped on Normandy. And I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but let me look it up real quick. So this is him here. His name was Private Rudolf Dittrich. And you see his name, Dittrich, in that scene. He's actually in several scenes. He's a lot of these guys that you don't really get to know their characters real well still show up, and they still had men who portrayed them in Band of Brothers. And it says, died in a parachute training accident. I think his chute failed to open or something. And he was killed May 20th, 1944, just a couple weeks before D-Day. He's portrayed in the first episode of the HBO miniseries. Men did die in some of those things. Here's showing the football team and who played on those teams. Of course, they had a basketball team too, and it's just really cool. I mean, there's well over 100 pages in this whole thing. Here is Colonel Sink talking to Montgomery at Chilton Foliot, which is that school that you hear mentioned, because that's where Captain Sobel gets reassigned to train people. So a bunch more stuff. There's Churchill and General Eisenhower with guys from... this is a demonstration jump that was put on for those guys. That's really cool. So here's the invasion then. There's D-Day, and we're seeing kind of portrayals of the area that they had to jump. all the planes lined up. That's really, really neat to see a lot of these pictures. You see guys getting ready for all of that. Personal commander from the commander, or personal letter from the commander in chief. From Bernard Montgomery, Commander-in-Chief, 21st Army Group. So Eisenhower's the overall commander. Montgomery was given command of 21st Army Group, which was all the land forces that were going to land at the 5 beaches. And there's the letter. Soldiers, sailors, and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force. And then there's that letter. And you see that quoted at the end of that episode. I think it's episode 1 of Band of Brothers. Here you have like the little cricket things that they bought, those dime store things, and the call sign flash, and then the response was thunder. Maxwell attack Taylor, it refers to him. Like everyone else, landed in the wrong place, far from the jump field. Gathering his stick, he ordered an attack and moved in to capture Poupeville. And then it just kind of talks about where the different guys landed and what was going on with them. There's a piece of a wing being knocked off of one of the planes. There's the remnants of a glider, it looks like. All kinds of pictures showing what was happening at that time. Butchers with big pockets. There's a citation, battle honors by General Marshall. The 506th Parachute Infantry is cited for extraordinary heroism and outstanding performance of duty and action in the initial assault on the northern coast of Normandy, France, on the morning of 6 June 1944 in the vicinity of Saint-Côme-du-Mont in France. And it just kind of shows some of that. Very cool stuff there. 25 heroes of the 101st Airborne awarded Distinguished Service Crosses. There was this stupid rule that had been issued that each division could only have one man issued a Medal of Honor for actions on D-Day, and it was Colonel Robert Cole, who deserved it, who led a bayonet attack, who was given the Medal of Honor for Normandy. And he was later killed. I actually visited his grave in the Netherlands. And they'll be in one of my videos from that cemetery talking about that. But you see the men who were given Distinguished Service Crosses. I think one of them was Father Robert Maloney, who was the regimental chaplain for the 506th, who you see him in a scene in the attack on Carentan out praying with men in the middle. And you have Malarkey saying, "Crazy men, those Irish," and talking about him there. There's Captain Richard D. Winters, Lancaster, Pennsylvania, right there listed for his Distinguished Service Cross for that famous attack and silencing the German guns. So then we see the liberation of Holland and see all of that listed. September 17th and the pictures that were taken of the men dropping there. Wasn't as smooth as one might think from watching Band of Brothers. There were some airborne men who were shot down during all of that. There's a map showing the different places that they dropped and their things that they had to accomplish. So really, really cool, especially for these guys who were a part of this. There's the liberation of Eindhoven happening. I got to walk those streets in Eindhoven, which was really a cool experience. Some signed Clark Gable or J.J. Pershing. This man penned C.W. Bolt. So that's kind of funny. The most popular man in town, any American sky trooper. Hell's Highway. So you see now the pictures kind of Eindhoven being bombed afterwards. Opheisen. This is now where they're going to get into position in what we call the island. The 363rd Volksgrenadiers are the men that they fought at places. 5th October 1944 is the famous battle at the Crossroads. Got to visit that location. Looks exactly like it did in Band of Brothers. And walking with the guys who were actors, Mark Lawrence, who I was walking with, said, "Man, it's like being on the set again." He said it just looked identical. This is really, really neat stuff. Let's skip ahead a little bit. So now we're on to Bastogne. Those poor bastards, they got us surrounded. And then there's the word nuts. I think that's a picture of General McAuliffe there. So now we're getting into the battered bastion, Bastogne. There was a trooper named Harris who never quite got to see Paris. And there's the advertisement for the big football game, the Screaming Eagles versus the Sky Train, that was supposed to be on Christmas Day in Rems, and of course it never happened. 7 more looting days till Christmas, or wasn't it fun while it lasted? And they were the hole in the donut. Yeah, being completely surrounded. So check this stuff out for yourself. I'll put a link in the description so you can kind of check it all out for yourself. Noville is that attack that happened after the attack on Foy. It's spelled F-O-Y. They all call it Foy on Band of Brothers, but it's pronounced Foy. And it's really neat. You can see all of these maps showing exactly what they did and where they did it. And then, of course, we're going to see kind of the end of things, probably going up to Berchtesgaden Garden. There you go. You have that kind of that guy saying, no, you can't come here. General Tolsdorf is that general who gives the speech that you famously see Liebgott translating for Winters and Nixon, portrayed, incidentally, by the same guy who plays the German officer in Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade, and whose face melts. No, it's not Last Crusade. What am I thinking? Last Crusade's the one with the Holy Grail. Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. He's the same German guy who plays General Tolsdorf in Band of Brothers. Pretty cool. He also plays a German officer in the Lost Battalion movie. Same actor. I don't know the actor's name. But there's actually pictures of that. That's really, really cool to see the real pictures of these places. You are now entering the city of Zell am See, home of the 506th Parachute Infantry, Fallschirmjäger. Welcome. That's really cool. And now they're playing baseball. They're doing track and field events. That's pretty neat. It's cool to see. There's the swimming. You see Dick Winters swim there in Band of Brothers. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. If you want to check it out for yourself, I'll put a link in the description checking it out. And we'll explore more types of things like this. If you want to see more things like this, let me know in the comment section. Hit that like button if you would. We'll see you again soon. Thanks for watching.